Stay. Oh, my clock's run out. Welcome to the programme. We're just going to wait for all the stragglers to turn up because we're only just gone live. So before we talk about Saturday, and indeed Friday, because we've got to analyse London Scholars versus Doncaster, 60-0. I mean, it's the first time I knew what the score was.
Let's analyse that then.
Let's spend more time talking about the road home from Wembley on Saturday, because it was discovered that James Child has been to see, and this is after we had a conversation earlier on that I watch professional wrestling, and apart we don't understand that. That's some kind of bizarre concept. However, James Child has been, did you pay to see her?
I paid, yes.
To see Jane McDonald live. I mean, obviously she's one of the icons of the city of Wakefield. Her, Chanel from Big Brother, some rugby players, the people in the prison, Martin Kellner, the people in the prison, not necessarily in that order, and two of those are not really from Wakefield. But she's good apparently.
Well, in my defence, if you didn't know if I was gay before, you do now.
Well, I mean, that came as a surprise in the Mackin Cup.
She's a bit of a gay icon, yeah. No, she was actually good. I mean, the revelation, as I said to you, was that she was actually a good singer, that I realised. It wasn't just amusing.
What happened was we were discussing making the Challenge Cup bigger than it is by bringing in some entertainment. We didn't know what kind of budget we had. People wonder what James's role on this podcast is. It's not just to say ex-referee got this right and referee got this wrong. It's to listen to all the other rugby league podcasts so me and Phil don't have to, so they don't go higher in the charts than us. And on, was it Sky's podcast, Eric Bowman was saying how much he paid for Scouting for Girls and the lottery winners?
Correct, yeah, something like £17,000 for whoever it was, Scouting for Girls. So it's where Jane McDonald ranks in that versus Elvis that was £400.
She's on Loose Women though, so I imagine she's not cheap. But
so maybe we could just get Elvis for the next Challenge Cup final, £400.
Come to Wembley.
Be well spent.
4 games of rugby league.
Probably cheaper than Alex Simmons.
Possibly, I don't know.
She probably sings better than Alex as well. The other revelation over the weekend, which of course has very little to do with the action on the field, but the gaping mouths of the three of us when during the women's game, flashing up on the advertising were Tunnock's caramel.
I wonder where we're going during the Women's Cup final. Flashing, hang on.
And we're going, where's our percentage of introducing this king of biscuits to the sport?
Have you not seen our LED perimeter advertising?
That's 0.5 of a percent.
I might be behind the magazine. I might have to move the magazine so people can see it. Look, where are they? Oh, no, I've got a different angle on the thing today, so you can't see it. And there's also a leopard there on the book, which again, if you're not watching the program, you listen to the podcast, you won't be able to see. We've got 20 viewers now. That's enough to start talking about the weekend in rugby league. There is nothing. I don't want to upset the London Scholars. Obviously, Carl Hull writes in the magazine. I don't want to upset him, but we don't spend any time on League One anyway. So that happened.
The only thing to say about that,
yes,
is there were only 500 people there, and when the concept of Friday Night Lights started, there were maybe 2,500. Maybe because there are 3 games at Wembley on the Saturday, it's going to be very hard also to get people to commit to something on the Friday night before. So good luck to London Scholars, and praiseworthy as well that they actually give us their crowd in these days when nobody does. But it does as a concept, it does seem to have lost some of its momentum.
Wembley Stadium is an environmentally aware thing, which is amazing. It's an inanimate object. It is an inanimate object. But it's environmentally aware, which is why they charge £50 for parking. That's why. Not to make money. Or the park next door for £15. Top tip for you.
Top tip. We won't tell you where.
No.
£15, right?
We won't tell you which car park it was either. Because I didn't put out the picture of the person. We couldn't work out who it was, whether it was Mick Jagger or not. But we're going back for the next 2 years, which is amazing news. Great to have Rugby League's future secured, especially as we already knew we were going back 10 years ago for the next.
Yeah, I was just going to say, was it news?
Well, it appears to be. It's everywhere.
Apparently, it was announced in 2018 that they'd signed a partnership till 2027 at Wembley. So I don't know if it is
2 years off the deal we've got already, isn't it?
The move into June, I can understand. The 2 years makes no sense. Yeah. But I think, as you very rightly pointed out, that will be 5 different months in the last 5 years that the cup final has been staged. And we wonder why we don't have a brand or people know where it is in the calendar, and therefore it would attract neutrals. So we can say all we like about other competing things that were on in London at the time. There will always be competing things on in London at the time. But if the good people of London and the South don't know when the Challenge Cup final is, as in they know when Wimbledon is. It's not surprising that we don't feature when they can also go to Twickenham and watch Rugby Union, or Arsenal in their first day of the Premier League season, or even Millwall if they're with McCarthy Scarsbrook, who lost at home. But we won't mention that, sorry.
I agree. There's got to be some consistency about when the competition is going to be held. Obviously, it didn't announce when it was going to be held in 2025, did it? Said it was going to be in June in 24.
Did it say June for the next 2 years? I think it did.
I think
June the 8th for the next two. Well, it won't be June the 8th.
June for the next 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, well, fair enough. And I mean, I think the idea was to move it back to May, wasn't it? But it's ended up sort of early June, which is better, I think, because it's away from the school holidays in the summer period. But we've had October in 2020, July 2021, May 2022, August this year, and June next year.
The other thing is, I think that will signal the death knell, if not immediately, of Magic Weekend. Because I don't think you would have the Challenge Cup in June and then Magic at the beginning of July, which it was this year.
Unless it gets moved later in the year, as they had previous year when they had it in September.
The problem with that is football grounds and their availability.
And any earlier, as you mentioned before we came on, the year that they had it in Wales in February. I guess, where does that fit?
I'd like to start the competition with a Magic Weekend where everybody meets at the same place and we have a big festival and say it's the start of Super League. We're all here together and arms around each other, and 60,000 people in one stadium over a weekend. But you've got to decide where that is in February, because which stadia are going to be available at a football stadium. You don't want to travel too far in February because you're inviting abandonment because of snow. Or, we shouldn't start in February anyway, that's another issue. But there might be a case for saying, unless the World Club Challenge is nailed on as your season starter, and of course we saw another game this weekend that was moved from week 1 with Saints and Huddersfield, so it disrupts your Super League. You either start with a standalone World Club Challenge, or maybe round 1 is your Magic Weekend to kick it off, your Challenge Cup in June to give it a boost mid-season, and your Grand Final and Promotion Relegation, or whatever, Championship Grand Final as it will become at the end of the season.
I think you're right. It probably signals the end of the Magic Weekend, probably, doesn't it? Because you need to be inside a stadium with a roof, and I don't know if there are.
So that's Cardiff, and that's it.
So that's Wimbledon.
Yeah, and it's too big a stadium as it is, so just can't see that happening.
Is centre court smaller than Odsal?
Yeah, it's a 20,000, I think, centre court.
No, I mean the pitch.
Oh, it'd be in line with
Is it court?
Oh!
Pitch, court, pitch. You can tell there's no crisis at Warrington this week because there's no one on the comments yet. So tell us, Kev, where are you? What's going on?
I think we may have done Warrington today.
We have, because everyone complained. Well, one person complained last week. We didn't talk enough about the Challenge Cup final. Well, here's an hour on the Challenge Cup finals and other stuff. Lee Leopards are the champions of the Betfred Challenge Cup. They beat Hull Kingston Rovers 17-16. I'm not sure how much of the game I saw. You probably saw more of it than I did because I was in the bowels of the stadium speaking to people for much of the first half. Hence why I didn't vote on the Landstod Trophy, because I know you're supposed to, I know people just like, well, Lachlan Lamb kicked the goal, just give it to him anyway. You know, like when Luke Gale got voted for doing a drop goal.
But the great thing this year, well, and full credit to the RFL media people, we didn't have to vote until after the game was finished.
And also quite a spread of names, apparently. Was it 7? 7 out of 34 or whatever.
You voted, didn't you?
I think it was 20 out of the 29 were for Lachlan Lamb. And then obviously the others were mixed. I did. And I think it was
complaining because you're not.
It was very difficult to decide, to be honest. Certainly at 80 minutes, and you sort of suggested that they usually do the vote 10 minutes to go. I mean, that was even harder at that point.
You were shocked it was on paper and pen, weren't you?
Well, I thought I'd heard it was, but then to actually see it in person, I suppose it was a different story. But
you got to see a lot of things in that press box, didn't you?
Yeah, the similarity between referees and media is there. A collection of misfits, I think, both media and referees. Yeah, speaking to myself here. But no, I mean, there was a number of players that you could have picked. I mean, I thought John Asiata played very well for Lee, and probably similarly there were players for Hull KR you could have picked.
Sean Kenny Down was outstanding, and I think if they'd have won, he'd have probably been the player of the match.
I just think ultimately when it comes down to a drop goal to win it in a cup final that's not been effectively drawn since 1982, I think you're hard pressed to not.
Well, and the other thing is the one genuine moment of quality, and we'll talk about whether quality matters, was Lamb creating and scoring the try.
Yeah, I was going to say that. It was a great try, that. Yeah, and they made some good line breaks, Lee, and
his kicking game throughout was pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Michael Lewis played well. I thought Gareth O'Brien was excellent for Lee. Tom Amone, who didn't get a vote, was immense.
Yeah.
Has Tom Briscoe now become the highest point scorer in Wembley history or something?
Try scorer. Yeah. Eight now at Wembley.
It's not bad, is it? Scores again.
Again against Hull KR.
Why are people so... I don't know if surprised this way. Hull KR congratulate Lee as if this is some kind of new It's like the people sweeping up change rooms as this kind of exciting. Oh, look at this classy gesture. You don't just say, oh, you didn't deserve it, you were crap, do you? It's like, you were lucky.
Especially as they play each other again in 2 weeks.
I don't understand I know it gets a click on someone's website or whatever, but they, on the balance of everything, from what I saw, they were the better side over the 84 minutes. Can't have any complaints about who are the champions.
I think you can look at it in 2 ways, I think. One is, let's analyse who deserved to win and who didn't, and all the incidents in the game, should there have been sin binners or that, and that's fine, that's what maybe we're here to do. But the other thing is, I think you've got to take a step back from what you saw and just look at the overall impact of it. So a lot of people were saying, oh, it's a shame there were less than 60,000 there. Throughout most of the main game, the volume of noise from both sets of fans was such that had there been another 20,000 people in the stadium, it wouldn't make the scrap of difference. It was full marks to Hull KR and Lee fans for creating a fantastic atmosphere. And in all the debates about should Wembley still hold the Challenge Cup final, you try and tell those people that we saw walking down Wembley Way and the experience that they would have had in the National Stadium, that wasn't in some way part of the occasion, then I think we take it on a tour, take it to stadiums that might be more suited in terms of capacity. You will lose something. I think the other thing is all 3 games were very similar in the sense that for the entire 80 minutes you couldn't call them quality contests, but that didn't matter because there were some individual moments in there that will last forever. And we live in an age where the clip and the social media that you can make from something is almost more important. You know, the 80 minutes is for people like us who love rugby league and can sit there and take it apart and try and explain why certain things happened and why certain didn't, and for fans to debate in the coaches on the way home about what they did right and they did wrong. But for people who want to entice into the sport, whether they're fans or commercial operations, if you can show them Caitlin Beaver's try, it doesn't matter that they lost. Now, if you can show them Lachlan Lamb's drop goal, which happened to be the winning one, if you can show them Batley's try on the hooter, which, you know, again, they didn't win, but I haven't calculated, but I would say on the people that I follow on social media, Batley's try has been replayed more than anything else this weekend. You know, what was he go through? Something like 16 pairs of hands, and at the end of it, they score the most amazing try, but it doesn't win them the game. It doesn't matter; it doesn't win them the game. You don't even need to know who Batley are. You can just admire that.
Here's something that happened.
They had to do something. They did something. The stories that came out of Wembley, I thought, were brilliant this year, and it doesn't matter that the quality aspect may not have been there for the entire 80 minutes.
I thought it was a great day. I did, and it was good to see the women's final being played as a curtain raiser. There was, the crowd was looking fairly healthy towards the back end of that game as people got in a little bit early. And as you rightly said, the atmosphere that was generated, we were sort of more towards the Hull KR end, in fairness, but the atmosphere that was generated from both sets of fans was great. And as you rightly said, imagine what it would have been like, I suppose, if you'd got, I don't know, what was it, 58, another 10, another 20,000, but it was a great atmosphere, and it's just a shame when people talk about the magic of the cup. I think the magic of the cup's still there, and I actually don't think it's that much money in the grand scheme of things.
Not for 3 games.
You can get a ticket from £20, You share your travel in a car on the way down, or you get your bus, subsidised bus from the club or whatever. In the grand scheme of things, I don't quite get this argument about, I appreciate, I think in terms of Magic Weekend, I think that has taken something away from the Challenge Cup final, because I'm not convinced you get the same level of neutrals that you used to get in sort of decades gone by.
It was hard to say whether there were more neutrals there this year, because there were 6 different teams. I don't know how you calculate that. To the naked eye, you're still not getting all the... I didn't see a Whitehaven scarf. I might have
but in fairness,
30 years ago. Somebody's now going to send us it.
There will be.
Here.
There will have been.
And there will have been there. But you used to get that sense. We were there quite early, hence the £15 parking. But don't tell me what it was. And normally, as you see people coming into the stadium, you can identify which club they're from, and you go, "Oh, look, I'm Slot here." I didn't really see that.
No, but we didn't move around that much, did we? And I think I didn't spot where the Batley fans or where the Halifax fans were sitting until the men's final had finished and people had left the stadium, and then they sort of emerged. They were there, but you didn't spot them, and I think that's probably the thing with neutrals, is that they were probably there. And I think some neutrals stayed for that 1895, some left appeared to leave at half time,
and again, the debate about the 1895 is, where do you cite it and how do you promote it? But if you've got the women's final and the BBC are taking the first 2, then it has to go third. Credit also to the Batley and the Halifax fans, because they never lessened their support and fervour. Again, there might have been, and I'm guessing, and I don't want to do either of them a disservice, a couple of thousand of each, maybe a few more Halifax. So if you had in that stadium, let's say 6,000 fans, it didn't detract from the element that it was Wembley. You try and tell those 6,000 that they shouldn't have been at Wembley and we need to move it somewhere else, or it meant everything to those fans.
It loses something. Say if you move it to, I don't know, wherever, Aston Villa or whatever, Everton's new stadium,
or if you play at 8 o'clock in the morning because you want it on before the...
I just think it loses something by not being at Wembley. It still carries that prestige, and people making that sort of trip down to London. So for me, I still think the stadium is the right place. I think it's just about how do you get more people there. When you look back at the history, I sort of had a quick look today that 2018 Catalan played Warrington 50,000, inevitably, because it was probably Catalan. But then, ignoring the St Helens Castleford final in 21, because that was affected by COVID, there was a limit on the number of people that you could get in there. It was only really last year's at 51,000, and before then, you have to go back to 1945-46 to see a similar crowd.
And the other thing that was made mention, though, is that when we did the initial deal with the new Wembley, so 2007 to 2017, included in that were all the debenture holders, because they got a 10-year ticket for contributing to the cost of the new stadium. That meant they could go to any event. So we were at liberty to include 15,000 whether they turned up or not. So all of those crowds from 2007 to 17 take 15,000
Little asterisk gone.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you look back at the pictures, they are bigger crowds during that period, but you're right. I don't know. There was some traffic. There obviously were traffic issues on Saturday, and I know people that didn't go in the end and they turned back round, but it didn't for me take whatever it was, 15,000.
The thing is, though, if they'd already bought a ticket, you would be including that. It's just that they weren't there to hand their ticket over. I think we get too obsessed with crowds, and I don't think the issue necessarily is the teams that play. I think we did get more this year because it was 2 teams who haven't been there for a very long time. But I just think it's the romance has gone because we know it's going to be 2 Super League teams.
Yeah, but if you're in the Championship and League One, you've known in the last however many decades, the chances of you getting to the final is almost slim to none.
But that's why the 1895 needs building up.
But then all you're doing there is you're just getting the teams from those 2 Championship teams going, probably, and you're not encouraging other Championship League One teams. I don't know how you got. For me, you've got a good look at the sort of rugby union model, whereby they sort of put the emphasis back on community clubs.
Which you can't do
to sell tickets.
Because everybody's away.
Well, that's why you have to move away from the summer holidays, and I don't know to what extent they still do this, but the RFL employed staff to almost just solely look at school trips and community club trips where they put on coach travel, subsidised coach travel to sell tickets, and
which they can now do in June.
Yeah, and hopefully that move back, and if they can keep a settled date for the Challenge Cup final, then that should help matters, so that each year you know that if it's the 8th of June or there or thereabouts, you're going to go make a trip to Wembley.
I think the other thing as well is that the end of the season, particularly the end of the Super League season, but also the same in the Championship, you're into paid playoffs and finals. If you put the Challenge Cup final too near them, and you're throwing in for Super League clubs a trip to Catalan, and you're throwing in for Championship clubs a potential trip to Toulouse, which everybody would like to do if they can afford it, because they've all heard what a great time it is, and even clubs, you know, like Batley, when they played there the other week, you know, there's suddenly 300 or 400 Batley fans going to Toulouse and having a fantastic time. So you factor that in. You need to move the Challenge Cup away from that expense, and we haven't done that. You know, so to move the Challenge Cup to even later in the season, you know, suggestions are, you know, we used to have the Challenge Cup final one week and the Championship final the following week, or vice versa. We just, as fans, do not have the amount of money to do that. So yeah, do it in June. Get special deals, particularly for schools, especially schools that play, you know, in the champion schools. Maybe one of the things could be
which you actually couldn't go and watch because the stadium wasn't open.
But one of the ideas of
the
having
champion schools at for your school at any level, and you get subsidised tickets to go to the final.
But one of the ideas of having a blank weekend is that you get the people from those clubs that otherwise will be playing go into the game, and so that's for me again why you have to tap in. And I think there was some criticism, I don't know why, on social media of Wakefield and
what have we done
about putting on coach travel.
Oh yeah, we've done something positive. Yeah,
well, I mean, you know, of course you
Every
do.
club should be doing that.
Well,
you know,
the strange thing about this, Wakefield do that every year.
Well, yeah.
The supporters club do that every year.
Yeah, but that's what you. That's what should be happening.
Donkeys,
that's what should be happening for the Challenge Cup.
In terms of the women's game, talking about attendance, clearly we got the figure that they stopped counting at 1 o'clock, and it was 8,338, which was the biggest attendance there'd been for a Challenge Cup final. What we did find was that both Leeds and St Helens as clubs really backed this. So there were corporate parties there. There were, I think, again, subsidised travel from both of the clubs to get fans there. That can only grow. You know, the first time you do it, people watch and go, oh, I think I wish I'd been there, because not only did it look like a good game, but it's worthy of going. If my team is, or I'm just a supporter of the women's game, I get the added value of 2 other matches after it. But I thought both of those clubs were absolutely admirable in the way they, you know, the girls, women, ladies.
No, you like I said girls. It's all right.
Set off.
The girls played well.
The day before, you know, they were given, you know, they didn't have to sort of drive down at 4 o'clock in the morning, play a game, and then be back. You know, they were treated in the way that the men's teams of those 2 clubs would have been treated if they'd got to Wembley. You know, they were given the same access to the stadium for the captain's run. They were dressed. Yeah, I just thought there's a real starting point there for saying that's a great selling piece. That
can't go backwards.
Neutrals again may realise that no matter who was in that women's final, and let's be honest, for the next 3 or 4 years it's going to be York, Leeds, St Helens, or probably Wigan. It's worth going just to watch that as a neutral.
I'll read Andy's tweet because he pretty much summed up everything I wanted to say, but he's put it over 2 tweets, so I can just read him and you can decide whether you agree with them or not. It says, get in mind, moved the final from Wembley defence in early. KR fans travelled 140 miles in 3 matches to make it to Wembley. Lee 308, and he's done maths and stuff. So the road to Wembley wasn't arduous. A day trip, weekend away of 400-ish miles in 2023 is hardly a trek to the Patagonian rainforest. The biggest issue is how the sport is perceived by those outside the village of Rugby League. We will become a provincial insignificance if we surrender Wembley and play the match in the Heartlands. The full stadium argument is a dead cat. Prestige is why Wembley needs to remain its home. You heard all the women in the build-up talk about they never thought it would happen to them. Batley, Halifax, same. You know, Batley's never been to Wembley. Halifax not been there for a donkey's.
1988.
Lee and Hulkar, all the build-up is around. Well, Lee were there. It's 1971. Sorry to mention that again, Phil. Hulkar trying to pull away from the memories of 2015 or whatever. Going and as you both know, because you were both there in different capacities, Spurs, wonderful stadium, and not to take anything away from Spurs, playing international there would be great. If you do take the Challenge Cup final to Villa Park, or the new Everton Stadium, or Newcastle, it's gone. You don't Wembley, for all its faults, and there are many of them, and we're not going to go back 30 years and have the debate about where the National Stadium should be, because it's there now and they're not going to move it. All the history is there. As soon as you take that away, it doesn't have the same thing. We can move the grand final away from Old Trafford, and I don't think it would have the same effect. No, because although the Premiership's been played there since '87 and the grand final obviously since '88, it's just a football ground in the north of England.
Yeah. It's one of
Wembley.
When we went there, it was one of the best facilities we could have gone to that was accessible for the bulk of the fans that would be there. Challenge Cup is not that competition, and yeah, it would have been nice if it had been nearer purely from the logistics of getting there. But actually, it wasn't half a great day out.
Here are some comments from some people. You've all come in now, which is good. I'll come back to Frank's one about the penalty trying to cup final because I didn't see it. So I'm not that I don't comment on it anyway, of course. But Teddy says, I watched the men's and women's finals, but staying for the third game was too much for me. Sorry, you don't have to stay for all three.
No. It's there if you want it.
You don't have to apologise. You can stay for one game. It doesn't matter. Frank says, 1895 cup final should have been before the men's. That's a TV decision.
Yeah,
they wouldn't have had the women's game on BBC Two. 2 hours of bargain hunt and then come back for the men's final. So it either
goes first or last, doesn't it?
Yeah,
you can't go in the middle.
And if we go on to
and if it goes first, then you're either going to lose the under 7 game, or you're going to have the under 7s game at about 4 o'clock in the morning to get the 1895.
But you're also going to have that same debate, which is, and it goes back to Craig Lingard's point before and after the final. If a broadcaster doesn't want to show it, they ain't going to show it. We can't force the BBC to show a game they don't want to show, and there's no other broadcaster interested. Regardless of where the 1895 Cup final is in the day, it's for us.
I think
I'm not sure it's for everyone, but
I think he had some very valid comments to say about whether the competition was treated with
the promotion.
Respect.
Yes, definitely.
I think also they announced that it was going to be on our league coming. What was it? 2 days before. Again, it's almost like we perhaps should have promoted that a couple of weeks before, so people knew that if they couldn't get down to Wembley, where they'd be able to see it. That sounded a bit haphazard. Now, again, logistics of that we're not privy to, other than we know that had it been produced by a different production company, there may well have been a charge for it. There may well have been a video ref as well, and there may well have been better graphics. But the fact that it was announced quite late with a company that doesn't have access to all that paraphernalia, that's what we got. Well, I think, due respect to the teams that were there, we need to get that bit sorted out earlier as well.
You should be able to sort that out at the start of the season, because it's going to happen. It's going to be an 18.
Well, maybe they were waiting for Premier to say if they were going to cover it, and clearly they're in a lot of financial problems and weren't going to pay for an extra game, which is what they might have been hoping they would do. But I think he had some very valid comments, certainly about the launch on the Monday, where they were clearly on the periphery compared to the men's and the women's. But the coverage needs to be known earlier, and then more people might have watched the R League and would have seen probably the best try scored at Wembley.
Absolutely fantastic final, says Chris. Gripping game that had it all. So good that in years to come, no one will talk attendances. Keep it at Wembley. Sell out the bottom tier first before the top tier. I think they do try to do that, but
yeah, there were some people in the very top tier, which again will be the cheaper tickets. So you don't want to deny people the chance to pay what they can afford. But sometimes when you look there and you think, well, if we'd have had all 60,000 in 2 tiers, it would have looked and sounded better, because television doesn't normally pick up the empty tier until, of course, it's celebration time.
I think
when you can't avoid it.
I think they did all they could. They blocked off the top tier behind the cameras, and the rest has to be focused on getting people there, not hiding the fact that people aren't.
And I tend to have the feeling that the people who moan most about the attendance are people who are never going to go, and regardless of if you paid them,
unless it's their team.
If you flew them down there in Rishi Sunak's helicopter and gave them the best seat in the house not next to Derek Beaumont, because Emmett McManus must have been furious. So been mauled throughout the game.
Bruised.
Next to Lindsay Hoyle. You get to give out the cup as well. They still would moan about the attendance because they ain't going. Moving away from Wembley would be suicide, says Teddy. It's the National Stadium steeped in history. You'd have to move the Rugby League statue if you moved it away from Wembley, says Chris. We mentioned this on the way down. Well, I don't know where we were going to move it to. Sell it for scrap, probably.
I think the other thing as well is that the BBC have been long-time partners with the Challenge Cup. And again, if you look back in history, you're going to hear Eddie Waring commentating on the BBC. So, the 71 footage was Stuart Ferguson scoring and Eddie commenting on it, and Alex Murphy laying down when he should have been standing up, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not sure how much the BBC would want to keep giving it the coverage that it got if it wasn't at Wembley.
Because it's at the National Stadium at the end of the day. It has national significance, and it's a competition of
when the calendars are published in the newspapers at the beginning of the year, and we keep going on about, why are we never mentioned? The only thing that's ever in there is the Challenge Cup final, because it's on the BBC.
Yeah.
How you sell it? Do you have more entertainment around it? Do you sell it as a big day out? I don't know, but
not necessarily more entertainment. What entertainment?
Yeah, because the stuff on the pitch sells itself.
There isn't very much time between the games, to be honest. I think that's the one thing you may have found being in the media area, that if you're trying to fully box off one game, the next game's just about to start.
Well, there wasn't much time between the games.
I mean, you barely had time to go back for your third sandwich.
No, that's true, yeah.
For those
second chocolate brownie.
For those of us that didn't get any, because there weren't any left by the time we went.
I mean, even I managed to get about 2 of them, and I was up and down all over the place.
You're not allowed to say like a bride.
No, I wasn't going to say that, but you said it now. Good evening, gents, says Carson. Challenge Cup was an amazing experience. He was there. The best thing were the people in and around the stadium. And to add to that, Carson, the people who work at Wembley, and I think I've said this before, brilliant. Can't fault the people at Wembley who work there.
Couldn't have been nicer or more helpful.
Excellent. A credit to the...
The thing is, if Carsten can get there from Switzerland with no vested interest in any of the teams that are going to be there, then I think we can get there from Burnley. Phil
says he thought John Terry had a Derek Bowman outfit on for the Chelsea fans. He's always around, isn't he? You can't miss him. He's there.
I think
imagine if Derek Bowman was from Oldham or Dewsbury.
I think he's been fantastic for this particular competition this year. The amount of coverage that he's given and allowed, are the stories that I haven't seen yet the piece that the BBC did in the lead up that you saw it.
It was excellent.
I know there were some people watching it at Wembley as well when we were there. Unless you've got characters like that, you can't tell those stories.
Yeah.
And he does open himself a little bit up for ridicule. He doesn't mind.
No.
Because he's delivering, so you can.
And as he rightly said, the rebrand works because they're playing well.
Yeah,
the rebrand doesn't
absolutely
work if they're bottom of the league.
Yeah.
But the fact that they built this up, for probably 2 years now, really, in terms of the long lead up to winning the Challenge Cup final, hasn't happened overnight, has it?
And there's a genuine sense of fun around it. They're not taking themselves too seriously. We have rebrands where it's all very sanctimonious and we're altering the 150-year-old badge and all that kind of, but this was Derek's decided we're not going to wear the same colours as Wigan anymore. We're going to differentiate ourselves from the last time we've been in Super League, because the 3 times that we have, we've been in basket cases, and I put my hand up for one of those because I was in charge. We're going to be different, and everybody bought into it. The players bought into it. He set himself up right at the very beginning to wear all the clothes, but it's worked.
Yeah, and people would sort of say, well, why don't make the players the centre of attention? But I just think for this, the build-up, it was easy to put Derek out front and centre.
Of course, took all the
because
pressure
it'd take all the pressure off the players by making it all about Derek and the Leopards as opposed to the players. That would be different if it was another year.
Yeah. And you look at
the
number of fans that we saw that were wearing
that shirt. That shirt from Saturday is now, for the want of a better phrase, iconic.
Yeah.
That if they can produce more of those shirts, they will sell out because everyone has seen that now. And it looks daft, but
there isn't another sporting team that has a leopard on it, apart from North Leeds, and we're suing them.
Wigan's awful Warrior kit in 97, 96, they had that awful Warrior. The Wigan fans won that. I don't think they won anything in it. If they had won something in it, it would be more well thought of than meaningless marketing rollicks. I went to the 100 yesterday, which is fascinating. Free tickets, didn't pay. And before...
A bit like Wembley.
Yeah, exactly. No free food. I tell you what though, 34 quid for a hat. Even the people outside selling the knockoff ones, 15 quid. That's
almost as bad as 12 quid for a pie at Wembley.
But on the 100 website, this meaningless marketing stuff, this is great. This is what they describe Headingley as. A place where we get it done. Well, the men didn't yesterday. Headingley, the home of your heroes, the Northern Superchargers. The names are terrible. Northern Phone Chargers, my nephew called them. So he's funnier than me, which is good. But that's the kind of marketing rubbish that you immediately see through. Whereas you're right, it's amateur. I'm not going to move away from the fact that I said last year it's amateurish, because it is, because it was, because the way they did it and the badge changing 300 times. I think the graphic file says final at the end of it, as if it's some kind of joke. The kit having the wrong animal on. The away kit, I think the blue away kit is brilliant. It's a wonderful kit. The home kit I don't like. But I've never known, if you look back at when Cardiff City went from blue to red and then changed back, the amount of fuss and hassle and everyone kicking off about it. Leeds United have a sponsor that has the word red in it. Not the colour red, the word red. And all the fans, well, they're idiots, aren't they, anyway? But Lee...
Sweeping generalisation.
Well, it doesn't matter. Lee have got rid of the colours they've had for however long. I know there's still a bit of red on there and whatever, but that's not a League kit, is it? It's some Daft Leopard thing. And there hasn't been a massive backlash from their fans. I'm sure the fans who don't like it...
Because they've been winning. Yeah.
But
they tweaked the shirt early on, didn't they, to add a bit of red back in to appease them. But you're right.
The fans, by and large, have thought, if we don't get behind this, Stoke's just going to do it anyway, so we may as well. But they aren't buying into the whole thing. So even though I still think the way they went about it was terrible, it's worked. So what? Everyone's going to do it now. Who's going to be next? You couldn't make it up what Lee have done, says Chris. Exactly the fresh injection and realisation of a dream that in US sports would have a Netflix documentary about them.
I was just going to say, we had that conversation in the car on the way back, didn't we? That, the sort of 3-4 minute video in the build up to the game, I said to you, didn't I? It would have made a great documentary to follow Lee's, promotion into Super League at the end of last year, into their story to win the Challenge Cup.
Yeah,
absolutely. And stories like that, you don't have to follow sport, never mind rugby league, to enjoy.
Going back to what worked in terms of the key moments of all of the games, what we had were stories. So we did have the Lamb story. That was amazing. Whenever as a father and son hugged each other in tears at the end of a game because the son's just won the game and the father effectively has rescued his career and been with him since he was 6. The Chris Chester story, 2015, which you must be sick of. I asked him at the Lord's.
I think he was more worried about wearing a leopard print suit, to be fair.
But, he's banished the 2015 because he's gone back with the team, that played against his team in 2015. And he's put together this collection of people who a lot of us scoffed at, and I'll put.
I called him rejects the other week.
I thought it was an ageing team and the best that they could get on, but I never once thought they would be likely to finish in the top 4, win the Challenge Cup, and built something that is clearly going to last, rather than a collection of individuals that won a trophy and then moved on or whatever. They've work to do in replacing some of the ones that are getting towards the end of their career. But they've got to the stories that we had. The Jodie Cunningham being the player of the match in the women's game, but such an articulate advocate of women's and girls' development, and that's her role. We mentioned Caitlin Beaver's try, but if the backstory behind that is she's the first person to referee a game there and now score as good a try as you'll ever see there. It's adding to that legend. You want stories. You've got Simon Grix and Craig Lingard both leaving their clubs and both passionately talking about what it meant to those clubs as they leave. You've got Craig Lingard being arguably the only coach who's ever going to be on the touchline there in bare feet. And if anybody else does it, they'll be copying Craig Lingard. So it wasn't even let's analyse every minute and see where it went right and wrong. It's how we can build on those stories, and I just thought it had so many this time that even Ryan Hall facing Tom Briscoe, long-term teammates that had won so much together, and they're now trying to prevent each other from winning it. Yeah, fantastic.
I've just searched Leeds Leopards on Google and it comes up with fireworks to celebrate their thing. That's exciting. I was trying to see if I could buy a shirt, but their website's not working properly. But there is the question. I mean, where do we make the money from? Here's Andy again on Twitter saying, crowd viewing figures on the BBC, 1.1 million peak viewing figures. We should be working out how to get some of these through the turnstiles and into club shops. Well, go back to the 100 again yesterday. I mean, the gear's expensive, ridiculously expensive. But if I go onto the 100 website, there's a shop, all the club kits are there, I can buy them. I know it's a centralised competition, I'm not comparing like with like, but we don't have that. I can't just go onto a website and buy, if I'm from Banbury, I can't go onto the rugby-league.com website and go buy a Leeds shirt or
but
a
even
St
if you're
Helens
from
shirt.
Minnesota and you suddenly think, hey, that's a great bit of kit, and I've heard about this story, and I don't know why I'm doing an accent that probably isn't in Minnesota. I want to get involved by at least buying some merchandise. You can, great thing walking in. We saw women's bespoke merchandise. Never seen that before.
We had Paul from Glasgow was on the comments on the Edwin Apape video saying, what a game, the whole thing just oozed class, the setup, the teams, the entertainment, other sports should follow this, just outrageous, and a new fan of the Leopards right here, big love from Glasgow. So people have watched that. I don't know how he found the video, anyone watched Rugby League or anything before. How do we capitalise on this new excitement that we're new team, win something, they're a bit brash, they've got something about them.
That's why we've got IMG to capitalise on that. You know, that's why they're here, isn't it? To promote the players, to promote the stories, to get a documentary on Netflix or whatever it may be on BBC.
Well, there is going to be one on the wheelchair team that won the World Cup coming out in October. They've done a fly on the wall thing. It's not just the World Cup. Somebody had the presence of mind to say there could be a story here. There's some real characters. We'll start a year before. We'll film all the build up. And the one thing you cannot script is how it's going to end. And if they've got knocked out in the group stages, you rip up all your footage and throw it away. But Wrexham always looked like being a great story, particularly when there was Hollywood involvement. Clearly, wheelchair looked like, but you'd have thought, well, on the seedings and past experience and 2 World Cups that have been, marginally decided by the same 2 teams, they will at least get to the final. And if they don't win, it's still going to be, we're going to have footage of people crying. Now somebody should be saying, Lee, either if we haven't already started, Lee is the story.
Well, the BBC did a documentary following the Great Britain ill-fated trip down under, didn't they? I don't know how well that was received. Unfortunately, again, results on field didn't.
Adam Hills
through.
had a documentary, didn't he, about playing in the PDR World Cup, which I haven't watched yet, but everybody who has said it's great. Well, Australia didn't do anything in the World Cup. They're the worst of the 4 teams, but everybody knew that if it's a World Cup, if it's talking about disability sport, if it's going to be fronted up by Adam Hills, it's going to be worth doing.
It's just about trying to get it to new audiences, isn't it? That's what I'm sort of saying.
And I think IMG will do that because I think actually they have started to do that with netball. League 7, who are IMG stroke Endeavour's arm of digital media and all this kind of, they've been behind netball for the last 2 or 3 years, particularly turning it into the Super League and into the Vitality Super League and then into a team that goes into the World Cup and for the first time ever gets to the final. They haven't influenced anything that's happened on the field, but we all know a bit more about it than we ever did, and that is down to IMG. So you would hope that they're going to operate in the same way within Rugby League.
Merchandising, Steve Mascott says it can be done. Centralised shopping thing.
Well,
he's offered to do it.
He is the most frustrated person in the world because he knows it can be done because he could do it. Yeah. But he's just not given the outlet.
He's going to be selling me a leopard shirt.
If he could get them, he would. But the problem is there aren't leopard shirts because I don't think even Lee would have overproduced because it's such a huge cost. And if it comes out, I think St Helens produced a limited number of their World Club Challenge winning shirts, but they didn't come out until about 6 months after they'd won the trophy. Yeah, they're out now.
Oh, they're out now, yeah.
But, the World Cup, they'll tell you that because we didn't know till the very last minute what the nation's colours would be wearing, who would be their sponsors, we couldn't really do merch. I'm not sure. I think you have to do it.
Chris says, as a Warrington fan, should we get the lid off the trophy due to half the league team coming from our 2022 team? Lid doesn't come off.
No, sold it on. Sold it on.
There was a funny moment when I was speaking to someone in the tunnel after the women's finals. They were very impressed with the quality of the medals, asking how much it would cost to melt it down. But I'm reckoning it's not much gold.
Must have been a winning medal.
Yeah, not much gold content. Just in case, No, man, it's change they'll get played, do they? So they've got to find somebody from somewhere. Very disappointing Jodie didn't cry in the press conference. I exactly got them more views, but not gonna happen.
The price of gold has gone galactic, apparently.
There you go. So well done, St Helens. Do either of you watch Benidorm? Because I don't.
No.
So can't refer to Andrew's tweet about Derek Beaumont being in that.
No, but I think Derek Belmont is the type of person that we could get on Celebrity MasterChef. Or
well, we can't get anyone on bloody Strictly or anything.
It was on Judge Rinder, wasn't he, with Mao Kukash?
Again, I must have missed that one.
That was when we didn't like Derek, but now we've got to like Derek. So it's very confusing, this. I don't know where we are.
But we have got personality. You know, Lachlan Lamb should be on A Question Sport. I don't know when the next film
they'll let anybody on that, won't they?
I'm told they do.
I mean, you're not on Strictly. I mean, you've been on that. The Strictly lineup is terrible. There's only Les Dennis on there. It's terrible. Should we talk about the match? The men's one first, because we had a couple of questions about it. Mainly because it's just refereeing questions. Do you think it should be a penalty try in the Challenge Cup? What do you think? I don't know what this incident is, because I might have been downstairs at this.
No, and I think Hull KR knocked on, didn't they? I think. Oh no, Lee knocked on. Hull KR kicked ahead. They were sort of Lee and Hull KR players sort of chasing a loose ball, and he ended up where it was. The video referee, Chris Kendall went to the video referee to ask whether there was merits for a penalty try. It went up with a live decision of no try. Obviously, there was no try, but in his opinion, it was no try as well in terms of it not being a penalty try. And I think that was absolutely the right decision. There was no clear pullback. There was no clear obstruction. It was just players going towards a loose ball, trying desperately to get to it. And I think, absolutely right, they did go back for the knock-on. And, I think one of the things in terms of big decisions like that, Chris Kendall was criticised, was it last year, in the St Helens Salford game, for making his own decision, not referring to the video referee and placing somebody in the sin bin. On this occasion, he did choose to send it to the video referee. And I think that's because, those experiences change you as an official. We had a Challenge Cup final a few years ago where a decision wasn't referred to the video referee. So sometimes you can't win. If you refer it, it's like, oh, why were we referring that? And then Hull KR fans were complaining, well, why didn't they refer the Lachlan Lamb try? Well, there was just no issue with the grounding of that ball whatsoever, in my opinion. And if you're in the territory then of just referring every single try for the sake of referring it. So
I also liked that the try that was at the end. I mean, clearly, as a referee and a video referee, you're being asked to adjudicate on something that's going to have a massive impact on how that game finishes. And I thought Liam Moore was great to say, I'm going to take as long as I need to take, and I need to view this from as many angles as you've got. And yeah, there was a little. I mean, it sort of added to the excitement in the stadium, because you knew that if it was going to be given, the likelihood was we were going to golden point extra time. If it wasn't given, then it was going to deflate half of the stadium.
It's easy when
I don't know how many times we looked at it, but it seemed to be that it was the biggest belt and braces exercise you could possibly do.
I just think that,
and why wouldn't you?
I mean, the obvious criticism is it took too long, and it probably did take too long. But when you're not the person that sat there making that decision, so it's damn sight easy when you sat sort of just looking at a big screen in the ground. So, well, it looks easy to just give a decision. But I think he was absolutely right to go through to check every angle possible and to review it to get to the right outcome. And it was the right outcome. I just think that the more you look at it, and the longer it goes on, there's no chance of it being overturned, because you don't have an argument to suggest that you have then sufficient evidence. But look, it was the right outcome.
I think what might help in the ground was if you got that commentary.
You could hear it. I agree.
Well, that's the other thing at the cricket yesterday. You did hear the third umpire say.
Yeah, and I've listened to Howard Webb this week on Football Daily talking to Matt Chapman about VAR in football and the measures that they're taking. And what I didn't realise in football is that those rules are governed by the sort of international FA.
Right.
That they can't broadcast the VAR audio to a TV audience, because that's not allowed under the international FA rules. Well, we don't have those constraints in rugby league. We can kind of do whatever we want domestically, and
we can have different rules wherever we are in the world.
And I think you're right. I think
taking
it to
the
the next level,
and it goes to hush, and you're hearing Liam Moore say, "I know, I do need to see that again." And just give me. Have you got anything from behind the post? I would think that would add to the.
I think as soon as the referee says time off and puts the square in the air, the referee's mic should go to the stadium.
Well,
everybody
it's now
should
down
hear,
to the broadcaster, isn't it? So everybody on telly has an advantage that those in the stadium don't have.
Everybody should be able to hear what the referee is asking to check, and then everybody should be able to hear what the video referee is looking at. Because I think sometimes when you understand what he's looking at, you then realise why perhaps it's taking a little bit longer to make that decision, when you sort of just keep saying the same replays, you don't understand really what it is. But I thought across all three games, I thought they were really well officiated. I don't really. I mean,
You
people
didn't have an issue with the sin binning.
Well, this is what we've been asked. Do you think it should have been a yellow card for Minchella? And should Ben Reynolds have been shown a red card on the 40-minute mark? He looked a complete Birkin tunnel. Have you seen him with his goggles on his head?
I know.
There was a few pairs of
I
goggles.
think they must have decided that because they were going to be spraying lots of stuff around, they'd all wear goggles or something.
Like one of the Paul brothers.
Well, in terms of the sin bin, at first, live, and Phil will support me on this, live, I said straight away that's a penalty. I was concerned when Chris didn't penalise it, but he clearly got input from the side, from one of the touch judges to suggest that he should have penalised it, so that was the right outcome. And then in terms of the sin bin, for me it was a sin bin because the obligations or the indicators that the referees are looking at, on the video referee, to offer advice to the on-field officials is that the defender should be either looking to charge the ball down, so clearly looking with his arms raised to charge that ball down. I don't think he was doing that. I think he was probably, you'd argue, if you were Minicello, protecting himself. But the alternative is the obligation is for him to make an attempt to tackle and thereby wrap the player, take him to ground, and he doesn't do that. So for me, he runs the risk.
He turns, his elbow comes up. It's not a deliberate act, but
it's reckless. By bringing your forearm up, for me, if you're going to charge the ball down, bring your arms up to your face to protect your face, because that's why you're bringing your arms up for, to protect your face. Or you bring your arms up in the air to charge the ball down, and for me, he doesn't do either. And in doing so, it's reckless, and it's on a kicker who's in a vulnerable position. And we've seen it earlier on this year, Magic Weekend. I seem to remember there was a sin bin on a challenge on the kicker in that game. So I thought it was consistent with it, and I passed my comments to John Davison, didn't I?
Changed his opinion
about that.
When he reviewed the footage, agreed with you 100%.
Yeah, no, I thought it was the right outcome, and what frustrates me is on TV is when you hear the debate, and you don't have somebody that actually has
You've got Rod Studd on your side, so you're all right.
But you don't have somebody who is an expert in that.
No.
I'm not saying I or a referee is an expert in all things law related. You're right to have a debate about whether it should or shouldn't be a sin bin, but to give the structure as to why a decision is made is what I'm saying.
So you weren't a fan of Jonathan Davis's analysis?
Well, when you search on Twitter Jonathan Davis, it was just really all negative about Jonathan Davis and Jonathan's comments. Look, I don't have a problem with him disagreeing with the decision. And I don't have a problem with that at all. What I'm saying is I think if you have somebody that can say, look, these are the reasons why, or these are the indicators that the on-field officials and the video referee is looking at, that's the parameters in which they work. And I think, in fairness to Dave Woods, he tried to reflect that in his comments.
I also think as well that it didn't affect the game in any way, because if you look at Mincella's stats, they are ridiculous. I think he's one of the leading tacklers, and he missed 10 minutes of the game. Well, he may have been subbed at some point anyway. But if you're going down to the very last kick of the game to decide who's going to win it, a sin binning in the first half has not been materially affecting the outcome of that game.
There was barely a decision wrong in the game as far as I could see.
There were very few set restarts, and I think in the women's final there weren't any.
I think it was something like, penalty count was something like 4-3, 2-2 on set restarts. So,
yeah. In terms of keeping the flow.
But as you might find if you read this month's article, I talk about whether finals are officiated any differently, and my view generally is that it's largely down to the players and less down to the referees, and that there was some needle at times in the game, and I think particularly sort of that first incident after 3 minutes, wasn't it? Yeah. And if Hull KR look back, they probably regret that, because that was 2 points, and that 2 points ultimately, you could argue, had an influence on the outcome.
In possession.
Yeah, in possession to be penalised 20-30 metres out from your own line is pretty unforgivable. But I think that comes back to, you've got to let the officials deal with things. I think if you try and take the law into your own hands, and even on that, Chris Kendall tried to let the game carry on without blowing the whistle.
He said, don't get involved.
Yeah.
We could see him saying, don't go there.
Because he knew once he blew the whistle, there was only ever one outcome, and that was to penalise Hull KR.
Yeah.
Because they took the control away from him.
I see Arter, again, question his tackling style if you want, but he didn't do anything that he could be penalised.
That was like 3 weeks ago's story. We've moved on from that.
No,
something else has happened in the
meantime. Tackles, wasn't it?
But clearly teams haven't, opposition players and teams haven't moved on, have they? Because they're, concerned, as you would be, potentially having injuries caused. But, he wraps. Yes, he goes in low, but actually I think they were right on TV in that actually the percentage chance of an injury being caused is far greater to him.
I think
his head's in the wrong position.
The other incident I think that determined the game, which is nothing to do with sin binnings or referees, is the run by Robbie Mulhall.
Mulhern, yeah.
Mulhern. Where did I get Mulhall from? Oh, Nathan
Mulhall, who would be seen on Sunday.
To set up the position for the drop goal, because when Hull KR had their one chance, they were virtually on the halfway line, which Schneider would never be expected to kick that. But that's because they didn't set it up. They were never in a position where they were in control of the play.
I'd put the video on here, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to. Because
Mulhern's
run was excellent. Yeah.
Into a hole behind the front line of the Hull KR defence. That says something about somebody's not coming across the cover and shutting him down. But it's also about the discipline that they had to know that, like, your job is to get me to there.
Gets them in a good position. But also the defence is on a roll, so they're not sort of fixed, ready to put pressure on the kicker as well.
I think the other thing is Gareth O'Brien deserves a lot of credit for whipping the ball to Adrian Lamb as well, because clearly O'Brien has a history of drop goals, often against Hull KR.
Well, again, he wasn't closed down then, was he?
But he was closed down well by Hull KR, but was skillful enough to get the ball out, to give Lamb all the time and space that he needed, to drop his first ever goal, which I hadn't realised until he did his interview. He'd never dropped a goal.
But he's got loads of field goals before, has he?
Never ever dropped a goal. Apparently he's crap at them in training as well. Always try and never get them.
Well, that's like the teams that are good at penalty shootouts in training, but then cock them up in real life. So like the French. So well done, Lee. Well done, Hull KR, on being part of an amazing end to a final. As you say, whether the 80 minutes are the best final ever or not, it's irrelevant. It's like the Wide to West game. The first 79 minutes, and 58 seconds of that game are irrelevant, because the only thing anyone remembers are the last couple, and then the hooter, and what happened afterwards with the future Wakefield Trinity attacking coach. Well done, Lee. Well done, Hull KR.
Talking of Wakefield Trinity and coaches, and it's not relevant to this part of the programme.
Oh, right, okay.
Condolences to the family of Shane McNally, who passed away this weekend.
The gentleman.
The man who made Gareth Ellis captain.
I
should be able to read in a full
I will never forget that run in the playoffs in 2004. We were robbed by match officials at Wigan. I don't know who it was.
I wasn't refereeing that one.
Definitely robbed on that occasion. It wasn't the forward pass from Ben Jeffries. Definitely. I should have asked Ben Jeffries about that during the World Cup, but I've completely forgotten about
Papua New Guinea's Ben Jeffries.
Yeah. Hello to all our viewers in Papua New Guinea.
Watch out for an announcement on Wednesday about Tri-Nations international tournaments involving Ben Jeffries and Papua New Guinea.
I was going to refer to something, and then we went off tangent about something. Something to do with Saturday, but I can't remember what about the men's final. But what a final, what a finish. It was great. Everyone loved it. Apart from the Rovers fans, obviously.
I mean, I thought it was reflective of the season. I said this to, I think,
you
to both, in that it wasn't the best quality game. There was a number of errors from both teams. But as the season has proved, we've had so many close games. We've had so many games that have gone to Golden Point. It was entertaining.
Drama.
You couldn't take your eyes off it. No. The atmosphere was fantastic. For me, it just had everything, and that's kind of what we got. Yeah, okay, you don't want as many drop balls, perhaps, but look, it plays its part, doesn't it? In what
no tries ever been scored without a mistake being made. No. I think the other thing is that Hull KR will rue their end of sets, because I don't think they were as good as Lee were, and where they wanted to finish them, how they wanted to. A couple of times they sort of petered out.
The other thing to look at is the preparation. I think, because we talked a little bit last week about Hull KR resting players.
Well, this will go into the next game as well, won't it?
Hull KR resting players. Lee didn't. They played the full side. Lee was successful. As we probably discussed with the women's game, St Helens took a similar approach to Lee, and they were successful.
And Halifax did.
And Halifax. So all three teams that played their full strength sides were successful. So is it a one-off in terms of this year, as opposed to, but 3 out of 3 would suggest that maybe you're better to play your team. And the other thing that was mentioned was about the approach that Hull KR took versus Lee. So Lee stayed very close to the stadium. Hull KR didn't, and Hull KR I don't think did they go to the stadium to do a captain's run the day before?
They went to the stadium, but I don't think they did a captain's run. They
Yeah, so I think, again, interesting to look at the different approaches as to how they do it.
That's interesting about the Lee staying in the Hilton across the road. There are teams that have played at the Hilton that have frozen because all they ever do looking out their window is see the stadium.
Wasn't that mentioned
that
on Monday?
In 2014 with Castleford.
Yeah.
That there was nowhere for them to go and nothing to do other than focus on the fact I'm going to be there tomorrow. It's going to be a big day. There's a lot more you can do around Wembley, as we found.
Car wash.
Where have these things come from? But sitting in Costa Coffee next to the hotel, if you're a player, all you're doing.
It's all those things though that clubs will look at.
Absolutely.
When the time comes around again for next year's final, is that how do we approach it? What's the best approach, etc.
And the great thing for Derek was it was across the road from his hotel, so he could start drinking.
We asked the people, if you were there, what did you do around the ground? Did you just go in at whenever the doors open at 11 o'clock and stay there all day? Did you watch your game and do nothing else? What did you want? More entertainment? Or something else going on around the ground?
The other thing I would say, and the question I would ask is, did anybody try to leave the stadium to go back in? Because that's what you can do at Magic Weekend. Yeah. And if you're going to have 3 games on like you have at Magic Weekend, then you almost need to encourage that. Because there are now plenty of bars and restaurants on by the ground. So you can go out if you want to go out and watch the first game, or I don't know, or watch the main game and go out and maybe come back and watch a bit more. But I'd be just interested to see whether whether people could do that.
Don't read the letters page. Just don't read it. That's my advice to you this week. So Lee made their own kind of history, as did St Helens. Tara Jones, first ever. Did you want to say something?
No, just because I thought the St Helens won it in a golden 5-minute period in the first half. Definitely. But the difference between the teams was that their experienced players controlled the game when it needed to be, and they did. There's no question that if Kira Bennett had played, the outcome may well have been exactly the same. But Leeds missed the general in the middle of the field, and having her on commentary behind us rather than out on the field, I think probably upset Leeds more than they thought it would. But there's no question that St Helens were the better team on the day.
There were fitness questions about players at Hull KR before the final. Who played?
Ryan Hall played very well.
Fitness questions about Leeds Rhinos players before the game. Who played? And this is another thing going back in here. I kind of tried to, in the press conference afterwards, and you don't want to ask the losing coach many questions because, there isn't a story. The story is the people who win and say, oh, we did this and blah, blah, and just being generally happy.
And the lose are just, they congratulate them and wants to go and cry. That's
tried to steer things in that direction when I said, is there anything you would have done differently? Not the team last week, but before this game. And maybe that's something I'll explore in the future, but I'm not sure some of the players who played for Hull KR or Leeds were as fit as they needed to be.
I just think
and it's whether you take that gamble or not, isn't it?
The thing out of the women's game was it's the first one. You don't know what it's going to be,
No.
But both of the teams, I thought, made it an occasion. Saints were the better team. They had key individuals in key positions. Their spine was absolutely superb. But what a lot of neutrals will remember out of that game is Caitlin Beaver's try.
A fire-esque. I generally reminded me of that at the time.
Just stunning. And that, again, elevates the women's game to another level.
Dare I say 2 match officials made their mark? Tara Jones. Tara Jones, first one to score a try at Wembley.
Try given by a video referee, so it was never not going to be given.
Yeah. And Caitlin Beavers, obviously, we know about her history with officiating. But no, it was... The disappointing thing for me as a sort of a neutral watching was that it felt like the game was almost over when Saints had that 5-minute patch. Yeah. I'm not suggesting it was, because Leeds got another try, didn't they? But they never really kicked on to really put Saints under pressure. What they needed to do was, after Beavers' try, then have 10 or 15 minutes where they control the game. But actually, they conceded another try on the back of it.
Yeah. And that's
but the other thing, we're talking about Wembley at the beginning and the magic and the lure. We've cast an envious eye over what the NRLW are doing. We've seen the crowds, we've seen the quality of the competition. I would not be surprised if there were a lot of women players looking at those girls got to play at Wembley, National Stadium. That's an experience I wouldn't mind. And whilst they're not going to turn down 50,000 Australian dollars per annum, their season is only 10 weeks long. You could see one of the attractions to pull some women back in the other direction, particularly those maybe who are coming towards the end of an illustrious career, So Ali Brigginshaw, for example, which is a name that I've, just off the top, been brilliant.
She's the famous one, yeah.
However many years that she has, she at some point will retire from international rugby. She might be tempted to come over here.
Is she going to be a journeywoman?
I think she's probably at that point where she's not.
She's not doing whatever she wants.
She's already a real.
And I wouldn't call her a journeywoman to her face if she was.
She's sort of the Wally Lewis, the NRLW.
Don't worry, I'm joking.
But we've got an attraction there now.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
That they cannot match, and there's nothing that they can do that could match the playing at Wembley and that game being back at midnight to Australia and having that history, and now the women's tradition to go with it as well. That's has to start with this first game.
Not just that. I think it's also from the bottom up as well, isn't it?
100%.
In terms
100%.
of those girls starting out playing rugby league now have the opportunity to play at Wembley, and that's a massive.
Well, there's a great little story that Danica will tell in her column in the New Forty20 out this week.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of work.
It's in the corner there. It's got a paw of a.
Yeah, if you're a.
Is it a leopard's paw? Are we sure?
Are
you sure?
It's a leopard or a panther. Doesn't matter. They're both one. She says that she was brought up in a rugby league family where when they watched the Challenge Cup final, which they all did as a family together, the brothers went out and recreated what they'd seen, and they were the Ellery Hanleys and Andy Farrells. Now, little Danica sitting at home today can go, I want to be Jodie Cunningham, and go out on the field and join them. And it's just, that's what it means, isn't it?
I want to know who she would have been from the men. Who would she have emulated?
I think she felt excluded, but now little Danica.
She could have been Andy Farrell.
The next Danica.
Gun on her head.
I've got role models.
Leeds should have scored early in that one anyway. And then it could have been completely different. But they didn't take their chances.
Leeds' first 10 minutes, actually, they were pretty good. They were the dominant team. And if Amy Hardcastle had managed to score, and a brilliant tackle from Ebony Party to stop her, then it may have been a different game. So
we got the Lansdowne Trophy. That's enshrined in history. In the 1895 Cup, a brand new thing invented 5 years ago or whatever, we got the Ray French Trophy. The Women's Challenge Cup, which has been going since 2012, but we kind of forget the early history of it. They get the player of the match. Come on now. Nonsense. And this is something I mentioned a couple of years ago, and we were told it's in the pipeline. No, it's obviously not then, is it? Because they haven't done it. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that.
The other thing about the Ray French Player of the Match award is give them a proper trophy.
Yeah, it did look a bit crap.
It's a piece of plastic, wasn't it?
I got a better reward for arguing it in the sixth form, but it's the kind of thing where if we had it on this table, you'd say, where have we got that from?
Tat.
So what are you doing?
Not that Louis Jouffre didn't deserve it.
No.
Cherish
He
it
deserves
for
a
the rest of
better,
his life.
prize.
He came. We managed to interview him as he came off the field, and he had a little bit of plastic in his hand. Oh, is that your man of the match award? It's like not a little cup or anything.
I think it was actually glass.
Well, glass. It looked glass. No, it was glass.
Finding getting the RFL's good.
So if he dropped it,
he would have been all right. But Jodie Cunningham won the player of the match in the, and she was quite good.
I think you make a fair point though about the name. It needs a name.
And it's not just about names out there.
No.
And they can do it for the grand final as well if there's two.
We made a huge.
After two people.
We made a huge deal, haven't we, about honouring the lionesses that we've had going back, the shoulder. And
we've talked about culture on this programme before, haven't we?
Absolutely.
And the really good thing that you've talked about with us with Leeds Rhinos and what they did and announcing that squad with using the men that have been involved over the years in Challenge Cup games. That's the same kind of thing, but for player of the match, you sort of hark back to something historic in the women's game and somebody that merits their name being attached to that trophy.
But then I'm going to end up ranting about why the grand final men's one should be named after Rob Burrows still, and we still haven't moved on that debate.
We can do that later in the year.
Yeah. But Jodie Cunningham, she's just a great ambassador because she speaks so well about everything.
Passionate about the women's game.
She's the one that tweet of the week for turning up on her doorbell celebrating. Have you seen that?
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Absolutely superb.
And again, that shows the level of self-deprecating humour that runs through this sport. Have you seen it?
She's taking the hat off.
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, it's really funny. Because she clearly has been out all night and is slightly the worst.
Exactly so. I hope they're still drinking.
And so she should be.
So the Huddersfield Giants.
She's got one of these Ring doorbells and films herself ringing the doorbell, singing a song about Saints having won it 3 times. And it's just, she's still wearing a bucket hat. And it's light. And it's very funny.
Excellent. The Jodie Cunningham player of the match.
Won by
Jodie
Cunningham.
Won by Jodie Cunningham. Yeah.
And she got a proper medal as well, rather than. I mean, I assume the medal was made of some kind of cheap metal.
It wasn't chocolate.
No, That's the way if they bite into those winners. They think they're gold. Not sure. But, well done St Helens. Very well deserved. And again, you can't go backwards. It's at Wembley now. People will talk about whether the game is strong enough to be there or not. But it's there. And if we miss out on these opportunities, who knows what we're going to miss out on? The Lioness is on at the same time on ITV. Then we just had the netball. Whether you think women's sport is deserving of the courage or not, it's just going to be there.
Well,
anyway,
again, there's a report that says investors are now looking at women's sport more than men's sport. Because they think it's got more potential and it's got a better image, and they can control it because it's at the start rather than they have to buy into something that's already so huge.
You talk about potential. The two halfbacks were both 19.
Yeah.
Amy Taylor.
Yeah, who was great.
Amazing goal kicking as well. Caitlin Casey.
Who ran herself to cramp.
Wembley cramps back. 19 years old.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned it on the way coming back up. That's coming through in this current phase of where women's rugby league is, but the generation next and after who are going to have more professional coaching and access to strength and conditioning and nutrition and this and that and the other.
Well, that's why clubs have got to buy into it, because it's no coincidence that the two clubs that are at Wembley are two clubs that look after their women because they value what that brings to the club. I think Matty Smith spoke fantastically, and again, more great stories. He played for Everton with Wayne Rooney. And suddenly people are going, really? What's he doing coaching women's rugby league? Actually played at Wembley as well. He's another one who's played at Wembley and now coached the winning team at Wembley. Lois comes over fantastically as a women's coach in a women's sport. Again, you've got two really contrasting leaders of those two teams, but they're both really good stories.
And the other advantage that both of those teams will have almost this time next year, Challenge Cup final again next year, is that because realistically there's probably only three teams in the competition that are in contention, possibly four, the chances of them going back and playing at Wembley again for a second time.
It's a huge motivation for both of them because.
But also they've got the experience of having done that, so those nerves won't quite be the same. It stands. Hopefully again, the England team in good stead by having that sort of experience. But
I think you made a very interesting point as well about. We've all waxed lyrical in the games that we've seen in the NRLW that they're 70-minute games. And one thing that was quite noticeable, Wembley's a very wide pitch, Wembley's a very draining occasion, that the last sort of 5 or 6 minutes of each half, the quality dropped through no fault of the people that were playing, but there was probably more drop ball in maybe those periods of the game than there had been previously to it, and it might well be that. Is there any reason why, and we're not detracting from anything the women are doing here, that we shouldn't standardise the game and that maybe it should be 70 minutes in both hemispheres? And you mentioned as well that the women in the NRLW play with a slightly smaller ball, which genetically is tailored to average hand size. Why should we not go down that road as well?
In cricket, the boundaries are shorter.
It's not.
But no one goes.
It's not saying, oh well, it's because you're women. It's like we'll tailor the game to you to make you the best you can be, rather than you have to you have to play within the confines of how it's always been played.
I just think it's important to have that debate, and have a mature debate, as opposed to people saying, "Oh, well, you're being sexist." No, it's not about that. It's about if the NRL are doing it in the women's competition over there, then.
And the World Cup was played under those rules.
What was it? Played at 70 minutes, was it?
No, it was 80 the World Cup.
No, it was 80.
Because
that
was
the
international.
We thought we'd win all the games.
Yeah.
So you have to have one standardised set of rules.
Did we think that?
I'm sure you said no, you didn't.
I have no faith in England. I'm going to be in trouble for that as well. And of course, for the 7th year running, or whatever it is, I was completely wrong in writing off St Helens at the start of the season, wasn't I? Because they have the young squad and they've lost all their players and blah.
Well, I got two
there they are
two
again,
out of my 3 predictions right, didn't I?
The other thing about St Helens was they virtually, apart from Leah Burke, who's injured,
the young player comes into the side and scores a try. It's Phoebe Hook.
They had available to them 1 to 19, so they didn't all play in the positions that you would have those numbers. But again, just shows great recruitment, settled team, quality players. They had all the ingredients and they lived up to it.
Not there for the 50 quid they're getting paid because they're not.
told you Jack Masker should have gone in the dressing room at half time and said to the Leeds women, there's another 50 quid.
It wasn't not going to sit and pretend it was the best final ever, I think, but there's, again, great moments in there that will not be forgotten.
History was made, and the big moments will be replayed forever and ever. The joy of the Saints team on the final whistle, the interviews that they gave about how much it meant to them, Caitlin's try, Tara Jones's first ever try at Wembley, those are moments that...
And just look how far the women's game has come in the last, 10, 12 years, is it, since that first final at Heworth, and how far is it going to go in the next 10, 12 years? I think that's the important thing.
We've got to back it.
Brandon Moore said last week when I asked him, why should people say for the 1895 Cup final, he said, it's a different style of rugby to Super League. And the women's game is, again, a different style of rugby. So you had there 3 different styles of rugby league. The women's game is a throwback to how the men's game may have been slightly before professionalism, bit more expansive or whatever, less structure. I mean, the worry is, of course, now they're going to become professional and it's going to become structured and it's going to be rubbish. But
well, the NRLW isn't.
But there's nothing else to say about the women's game. I think we said all about the final. Well done, St Helens. Well done, Leeds, for playing your part in it. And go watch the stuff afterwards, because I spoke to the first ever try scorer, women Challenge Cup try scorer at Wembley. And Emily Rudge with the cup. She's very happy. Jodie Cunningham did say that in the press was that they were trying to get over to the players that it's just the same grass as when we train at home. And Emily Rudge was saying to her, no, it's not. Halifax versus Batley in the 1895 Cup final. I think I missed the whole of the first half, so you'll have to tell me exactly what happened.
Well, nothing happened.
Oh, so what then? I came in, got me brownies and a couple of sandwiches that were left. And another, as Eddie Waring would have said, grandstand finish with the most ridiculous try ever. Not converted, which is a shame because we would have had more golden point.
Would have got home even later.
I know. What time did we leave? About 9:30 we left.
Burger King may have shut.
But excitement.
I think if we were being honest, it was a pretty dour game until the 67th minute. And part of that is because Halifax were in so much control defensively, which you cannot deny that was the platform for their victory, and they should be lauded for that. But Batley play a bit of a percentage game for the bulk of it, just to keep them in it. And they found, I think, Craig Lingard said afterwards in his bare feet and bucket hat that they hadn't got into the game early enough. And, the last 20 minutes, they almost gave themselves too much to do because they were slightly off the pace. But when they got into it, what a finish. And I don't think you need to worry about the first 78 minutes.
I think I need to sort of put my cards on the table that my alarm went off at something like
asleep.
5:30 in the morning, and by the time it came to, because it was half an hour late kicking off as well.
Oh yes, it was.
And I think I was a bit like, I'm ready for home now actually. So, and that's no disrespect.
If I drank coffee, I'd have one.
That's no disrespect to the 1895 Cup or the Championship teams that were involved or anything else. But you're right. I wasn't quite engaged in that game quite the same way, and I think it's almost harder when you're building up to a major game. You accept that the crowd's going to be quieter and smaller, but I think once you've sort of seen the Lord Mayor's show and it's sort of after the Lord Mayor's show, it's hard then to, with maybe 6,000 or 8,000 or 10,000 in the stadium to replicate the atmosphere that you've got when you've got 58. It's just impossible. So I think all those factors combined meant that I wasn't quite fully engaged, but I think you're absolutely right. Towards the back end of the game, it was exciting. But when I had a chat with James Dayton and Jodie Broughton that were commentating for Radio Leeds, their perception of the game was completely different to my perception. So it just shows that they thought it was a sort of end-to-end game and a fascinating game. I think because of the closeness of it, it was always a contest.
Yeah.
I never quite felt Batley were going to do it, and I think that's because, in a way, for the sake of the game, it should have come earlier.
Yeah. What I would say is they scored 2 tries to 1, which again, normally you would hope the team that scores more tries comes out victorious. But the first thing that Batley did was pay credit to the way Halifax played. So there's absolutely no question that the right team won. Some of the individual skills, particularly from Josh Hodson, whose ridiculous flick pass set up the first try, and He was one of the. He got caught, but found a one-armed lobbed pass in the second try. He's from Telford. You know, again, we bang on about this all the time, that there is a whole pool of talent out there somewhere that we don't do enough to harness. And full credit to clubs like Batley, like Sheffield, who give opportunities to players who don't come from traditional areas around them. You know, in any other sport, we'd have known who he was and a little bit more about him, rather than wait until we'd seen what he could do and going, let's find out a bit more about this. Oh, he's from Telford. And, you know, what we'll remember about that game is not the dour defence of Halifax, which actually won it, and they deserve all the credit for that. What we will be consistently putting on our phone in a spare minute when it's raining and the bus hasn't come yet is, let's have a look at that Batley try again. And we had people putting it on social media who are not fans of either club or even necessarily the sport. But have you seen this? And it is
16 passes, isn't it, according to Kevin? It felt like there were more. It seemed to go on forever in slow motion.
I just think that, again, you know, when you're writing a report and you're trying to make a note of who it was, it wasn't just the passes, it was the quality of some of those passes.
Yeah, they were.
There's one ridiculous long pass from Luke Hooley right at the very beginning, and then there's another almost an American football style pass just to keep the mood going.
Yeah. Dare I say it? Imagine if a team played like that in the first minute.
Oh, man, you have to be fit.
That'd be like the 100. You just like whack it all the time.
Yeah.
The other thing as well that was if just added to the drama was that Hooley took the kick from the touchline, for which he should again be exonerated for anything, and 100% credit to every Batley player that ran over to him to hug him at the end, when they must have been heartbroken. It was at the Halifax end. Now, normally when you see a kick is going to miss, all of the fans are leaping up and down. I didn't see a Halifax fan move, and there wasn't a murmur from them because they honestly thought that kick was over.
Yeah, I thought it had gone over because they were quiet to begin with.
It must have been.
Yeah, close.
Which added to the drama. We had to look at the flags, didn't we?
Yeah. Added to the drama.
Did say to them, they should have just put the flags up and given it, because no one would have noticed. We would have liked it.
It was a great effort by both teams, and both teams actually were well supported in this.
And the atmosphere throughout was fantastic. Yeah. That again, yes, it's a bit cavernous because there aren't that many of them, but you could hear the Batley fans, even at the final whistle, had appreciated that that team had got them to Wembley and done them proud. The Halifax fans went berserk because they'd won the first piece of silverware since 1987. Really interesting other comment from Simon Griggs, I thought, was that whilst he lauded the 1987 team, and some of those teams are still around Halifax and are iconic figures, he was just pleased now that sort of monkey for his team was off the back because they were now going to be talked about, which was great.
I'm trying to find out what the crowd was at Wembley for the FA Vase and FA Trophy, because I think they just have a finals day for the things, but I can't find it. It's not on the website for the FA. I can't find it quickly enough anyway. But they don't sell out the whole stadium. They have the spot. I'm sure they probably have more fans there than left at the 1895. But I think we do get caught up in unless. Well, who is there outside of the Championship that's going to have that big travelling support? You know, there isn't. There aren't 2, 3, 4 teams who are going to have that. No. So it is what it is.
And Toulouse, presume you'd have to pay a bond.
Yeah, it's a competition that fills a brief.
I just think we need to promote it more because I think it's valuable in its own right. And every interview we did beforehand and every interview we got afterwards was all about we need to make more of this. Even Louis Jouffre was saying, you know, this is for part-time players. You can't explain what this means as somebody who it's not their main line of work to get the opportunity to play at a stadium like Wembley. They didn't care whether there was 10,000, 5,000 or nobody there. They got the opportunity to play. That, you know, their life will be now spent when they're in their 60s and 70s in the local pub in Halifax. And do you want me to tell you about that time I played at Wembley?
It's a strange French accent. Is there anything else to say about Wembley as a day?
No,
I think we've covered. I think. However, how we move forward on it, we've had the debate on here before. We can only say the same things over and over again. We can say, "What are you doing to say we need this?" Because we're not the ones signing the tickets.
All I hope is that because of the things we've highlighted and the memories that have been made, that anybody who didn't go now regrets not going if they could have done, and that next year they might think,
Just laughing at something Sid said on Twitter. But how are you, Sid? If you're listening, how are you bearing up? Because obviously you're a Rovers fan and you didn't win. But I think there's a big difference between this year and losing 50 now.
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's the other end of the emotion scale because you were so close.
I've not seen Huddersfield. I've not seen the highlights because we're still off the. It's like the end of the World Cup this year. I didn't really want to watch any more rugby for a while, and I'm not really interested in Saints versus Huddersfield in a game which I mean it looked close at one point, but Saints won.
Controversial sending off.
I took them by 12, so I was close. But yeah, controversial sending off. Cost them the game apparently. I've not read the quotes from Ian Watson, but I've seen the headlines, so I don't need to read the quotes. Cost disgrace. I don't know. I've not seen it.
Referees again.
Yeah. Is Ian Watson going to be on the naughty step with Paul
Probably.
And
We
Paul
are getting to the point where coaches are first port of call, not looking at what
Open
they
season
want.
referees.
But as I've said last week, because we're heading towards the back end of the season, and so the pressure ratchets up, and once somebody opens their mouth, then it encourages somebody else to do it. Although, having said that, he's aware that they're now under investigation, so I was surprised that he'd said something. But he obviously wanted to get in a line about Morgan Knowles, which that fell on deaf ears, didn't it?
Yeah,
because he didn't get charged.
Not been charged yet.
So if he does get fined, he might regret saying it, because it didn't have the desired outcome, I don't think.
Saints up to joint second, missing a heap of players.
See, at least when I said that, if we had a grand final now between Saints and White months ago, I would tip Saints. At least I may have got that one right.
Well, I think when you look at the running as well, I saw people were discussing yesterday, then St Helens arguably have an easier running than Catalan. So it will be an interesting...
I don't think they're bothered about Catalan. I think they're looking at, obviously, Wigan and Lee. Lee's going to be really interesting because who's going to back against them doing anything? But we've said all along it's a relatively small squad, and there always is a reaction to winning at Wembley because it's emotionally. It's the way Saints were at the start of the season. You've got to get up to that level, and then you've got to come down for another 6 games before. So Lee know they're in the playoffs. I genuinely don't know how they're going to go this week or next week or when it'll kick in the mental rather than the physical fatigue of winning the cup. But it will, because there's no team that hasn't suffered that at some point. You know, there's Hull, I think, was it? You know, one year won the cup and then very few games after that. Leeds certainly in 2014 won the cup and it meant everything to them, and don't think they won another league game after that. So that Saints will be looking at Wigan and Lee and saying, can we get to second? Because what we want is, yes, we'd love the League Shield, but what we want is a home semi-final, and I think they can. And it won't be easy because clearly Leeds is out for 2 games now, and they are really light on forwards. Lou is 108 years old. I don't know how many games he's going to play in. I spoke to him this week. He couldn't get off the couch, but he played because again they've got no real options. But it's going to be an interesting. I think Catalan's next 2 games are Wigan and Lee.
Yeah.
So if they win, arguably both of those, but certainly one of those, they're almost guaranteed League Shield. But the big game this week, if we're only going to preview one game...
Well, I mean, they're playing... we've got to go soon because they're playing Stanley in the Women's Championship, whatever the division's called these days. Monday Night Rugby. It's not on Premier, I mean, they could put it on there. But yeah, apparently Friday... I mean, I'm hoping... I might not get in now, which is quite funny.
Every media person wants to be at Wakefield.
You mean they don't want to be at Huddersfield versus Salford? That might be just the Carters.
You're accredited now. You could apply for your media.
Not Saints Hull Cow, not Wigan versus Hull.
Telly.
There's no point talking about any other game because that's the one.
Yeah.
And with both having had major coaching changes, it is just ridiculously intriguing.
So who had Sean Long at Wakefield at the start of the season? Despite the fact that Featherstone Rovers... I'm just having a look at the league table.
Who had him there even post the announcement of him leaving Featherstone? I don't think anybody would have done.
With almost like instant...
And not just to the end of the season, it's for next season as well as assistant coach. So
you would also think that Sean Long linking up again with Luke Gale.
Really?
The 2 of them together at Leeds, that when, again, 2 great halfbacks with great knowledge of how to control games, coming up against Blake Austin making his debut, if he's fit enough for Castleford. It's like got every ingredient you could possibly want.
Danny Ward and...
Dane
Durham.
Yeah. People you haven't remembered from a long time ago.
What do you
I
reckon?
don't know. I think Wakefield will win.
Well,
And that's a bad thing for me to say.
I think I'm giving away far too much content that's in a magazine that's out this
coming out this week.
But as Brian Noble says, looking at this very game, he'll be there in the media. He thinks that if Castleford win, it isn't the end of Wakefield, but if Wakefield win, it might be the end of Castleford.
Interesting. I just think with the home advantage that Wakefield have, I think the expectation will be on Wakefield.
Yeah, it's the weird kind of the change in, not momentum.
I'm not sure. I don't think there's expectation on either team. I just think it is complete do or die.
I think there's a bit more, bit of cockiness amongst the Wakefield supports after the way things have gone over the last few weeks.
The way Wakefield seem to have been playing over the last few weeks is that they put a string of victories together at home, and then they believe a little bit of hype, go away, and get beaten quite heavily, but then come back at home and regroup. And I think have they got 4 of their last 6 games at home?
Something like that. Graham Colley said that the other week, so I trust him. He knows what he's talking about.
So you would think the ball is in their court.
I think we'll win, but
you think they'll win?
Yeah, but I mean, if I'm not there, I'll watch it on telly instead.
You'll be there. How can they deny you access?
I used to work there. That's
exactly.
Michael
Have you still got your staff pass? That's all you do.
That's just all areas where I could get a game. Yes, that's Friday on the telly. Saturday on the telly, it's League Catalans. Sunday, Leeds Warrington. Which also at the same time as Leeds are in the Wheelchair Challenge Cup.
Well,
final.
not quite at the same time, but not able to get to both.
Terrible planning.
Although the wheelchair team, should they retain their cup, are hoping to hot-foot it up the M1 to be at Headingley to be able to show the trophy to the fans, maybe at half-time with the men's game.
Remind me, I need to send a Zoom link to someone so they can come on the programme tomorrow. Kevin says, Martin Gleeson back at Wire. He is? So
yes.
Yeah.
Interesting that they said it in a voluntary capacity.
What's all these, what can not afford him? What's all these coaching changes after the transfer deadline? You can't sign any more players, we just sign a load of coaches. I don't know. Wait for they're going to do it, says Kevin. But I don't know, I've just got a feeling Blake Austin's going to have a big game. I mean, it'd be not funny if he's injured and can't play, because that's not what I mean, but it'd be funny if they made a big deal about signing him, then he doesn't play. Any word on the Super League TV deal, says Teddy? Seems to be dragging on. Phil, any word on the TV deal?
Week after next.
Not this week. Not last week when it was going to be this.
You can read all about what we think it's going to be in the new issue of Forty20 magazine.
I won't ask that.
We have some insight.
Is it what I think?
Doesn't know whether it's. No. We don't know whether it's true or not.
Is it what? Do you reckon it'll be what everyone thinks it's going to be?
I think there'll be some things around the deal that will offer greater opportunities to make money in different areas without it being, here's a big fee, here you are clubs, go away and spend it. It's going to be, we haven't really got any more, but what we have got is access to make more.
What's that phrase about opportunity?
We've never missed an opportunity to take an opportunity. Now, I think you might find, without giving too much away, that every game will be available to be screened in a round, which will offer clubs the opportunity to perhaps make up some of the money that they're not going to get from
They'll have to.
A major rights deal.
I think, without knowing anything, because we're just talking Super League there, Teddy, but I think it would be wise for clubs outside of Super League to make their own plans of ways they could monetise their matches to those who are not in the ground.
And as part of it, I think we may well see a video referee again.
You come out of retirement to that. Just
didn't say paid video referee.
The roulette wheel, bring that back.
People would say I was bad enough when I was there, never mind bringing me back out of retirement.
I'll have to say, and I know we're coming to the end, that I used to take Harry Jepson down to Wembley, which was an absolute joy.
That's looking at car parking.
And I miss those days because he told wonderful stories of people and eras that would have been long lost if he hadn't told.
Did he get booed out at Leicester Forest Services?
No, but the one person on our road trip who could not stop being recognised or meeting people or having people come over to say, hello, how are you? It's like travelling with a celebrity.
You had it on telly for 20
Yes, Richard, it was.
And it wasn't Richard, and I was just a driver. So.
Everyone asking if we watch Adam Hill's programme. No, not yet.
But
we will.
We got it bookmarked.
I've got to watch it because I've got the thing to write about next month. We've done Wembley now. You'll have to see what I've written when the magazine comes out.
Will you.
I don't know exactly. That's next Monday when I read it. I'll know what I've written and what I can write next month.
I'll give it to you on Friday at the game.
If I'm there, yeah.
Oh, I should mention my small victory, or my second small victory at the Challenge Cup final weekend. Was
one with John Davidson.
Well, the one with John Davidson. But the second one was with Gemma Carter and Gavin Willis, which was we were in a conversation about the Challenge Cup final last year, and they said, "Who refereed that?" I was like, "It was me." But I said, "The fact that you can't remember is definitely a positive."
Yeah. Which I think you may.
So hopefully for Chris Kendall, he won't be remembered as refereeing it next year. That's a good thing.
Did you just cough loudly? Who was the referee?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy the press facilities? I've got to say, it's not like that everywhere.
No, I can imagine it's not like that everywhere. No, I've seen some of the pictures at Castleford's ground. No, it was good. It was interesting. It was just a different insight. Again, you know, I've been there on in different roles, but not as involved in the press. So it was interesting to see how it all operates and how you all interact.
And how little work gets done.
Yeah.
Interaction.
What are all those numbers you're writing down?
Who doesn't interact? Yeah, that's also true. I think we're done then. So we'll be back next Monday. It's not bank holiday next week, is it? It's a couple of weeks yet for the bank holiday. Back next week to reflect on the wheelchair Challenge Cup final, which I don't think any of us are going to be at. But
It's on the BBC.
It's on the BBC. I'll have to watch it after I finish.
Kicks
work.
off at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. See, I start work at 1:30, so I can watch the first half hour. Hopefully, but even if Leeds build up a big lead, you can't write off the Catalans come back, or vice versa, because it's just the ebbs and flows of the wheelchair game.
It would be nice to think it might be on the big screen at Headingley for those. I don't know if they can do that, because I don't know if they can get access to the red button. Yeah. Coat hanger.
Yeah.
Out the back of the set.
One for the teenagers. just make sure no one rod hole. Don't do that. On that bombshell, we'll be back next week. Talk about that. Stay tuned for someone involved in the final. Hopefully tomorrow, if I remember, send her a link. Just not to reveal who it is, and if not, enjoy the weekend. If you're at a game, let's hope it goes your way, especially if you're a Wakefield fan. If you're